Hello everyone and welcome to Procurement in the Park. I'm Christian Schuh and today I want to look at the evolving shape of the global supply chain and what CPOs need to do next. As we all know, companies around the world are trying to regain control of their own supply chains after the global supply chain crisis triggered by the US-China trade war, the COVID pandemic, and the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. The actions are driven by several factors, including the desire to become more resilient by ensuring the secure supply of vital raw materials, components and services, and the introduction of new regulations that mean they can be held responsible for the actions of their suppliers. Trying to regain control of their supply chains is a hugely complex task, not least because many big multinational companies cannot reliably match products to suppliers. This lack of knowledge may surprise many people outside the world of procurement. But it is so common that one company had no hesitation about admitting in its annual report that, and I quote, "We have one of the world's largest supply chains, and its size and complexity can make it hard to give a simple answer to the question, who makes your products?" Today, however, the task of identifying every player in the supply chain is about to get a whole lot more complex. That's because of a new phenomenon, reshuffling. In a recent study of a vast global database of companies' financial accounts and their declared customer and supplier relationships by the Bank of International Settlements, a Swiss-based financial institution that serves as a bank for central banks, it was found that global supply chains, it talks of global value chains, are in the midst of a far-reaching realignment. Of course, it is well known that in the quest to become more resilient, companies have sought to shorten their supply chains by engaging in nearshoring or working with suppliers located closer to the company and its markets. Confirming this trend, the Bank of International Settlements, or BIS for short, reports that dependence of global companies on cross-border suppliers fell markedly between 2021 and 2023. But this does not mean that US and European companies have established fully functioning, close-to-home regional networks. As the Financial Times reported, what is emerging is not so much reshoring as reshuffling, or a rising level of complexity that has expanded the distance in supply chains, or in other words, the layers between raw materials and end users. The BIS study shows, for example, that the distance between US companies and their suppliers in China has lengthened, and that, and I quote, "firms from other jurisdictions have interposed themselves in the supply chains from China to the United States." It is well known that as US and European companies diversify beyond China, they are selecting Asian countries, including Vietnam, Cambodia and Malaysia, as alternative low-cost manufacturing hubs. But what the BIS study reveals is that US and European companies are still sourcing goods from places such as China, but now they are doing so not directly, but indirectly via intermediaries in those Asian countries. For US and European companies, this growing complexity is problematic for a number of reasons. First, it makes them vulnerable to the volatile geopolitical situation, despite all the efforts at reshoring. Second, it makes it much harder for them to meet the increasingly stringent demands of regulators, and third, it makes it harder for them to drive down cost, since complexity is necessarily inflationary. As I and my co-authors from Boston Consulting Group say in our book, Profit from the Source, published by Harvard Business Review Press, companies need to focus on getting to know not only their suppliers, but also the suppliers of their suppliers and the suppliers of those suppliers. Given that some companies not even reliably match all their products to suppliers, then this sounds like a big ask. There's no question that it is challenging. But if companies want to become resilient in an increasingly volatile world, they have no choice. And it can be done. It is not impossible. In Profit from the Source, we tell the story of how we helped the US technology company take back control of its supply of semiconductors, facing the prospect of having to shut down its production of computers because of a lack of semiconductors. At a cost of $100 million, the company solved the short-term problem by sourcing emergency supplies of semiconductors from new suppliers. It then addressed the long-term problem by developing contractual relationships with companies that are instrumental in every stage of the semiconductor supply chain. Around the world, companies are actively engaged in reshoring their supply chains. But now they need to do more than this if they want to establish truly resilient supply chains. They need to understand that supply chains are evolving fast, but they are being subtly reshuffled rather than radically reshaped. To respond to the new challenge, CPOs need to establish direct relationships with suppliers at every link in the supply chain. This should be the #1 priority. Thank you for watching. I'm Christian Schuh, and this is Procurement in the Park.